We have two special senses that are chemical senses: taste, gustation, which we've already covered, and smell, known as olfaction. The olfactory mucosa is located at the roof of your nose, on the superior nasal concha, and on the nasal septum. This is because odor molecules are light and they will float to the top, and this is an excellent place for them to be located. There are between 10 and 20 million olfactory cells, and they can distinguish on average between 2,000 and 4,000 odors, but there are some people who can detect up to 10,000 different odors. These olfactory cells are actually neurons. The taste cells that actually detected flavor were epithelial cells, but the olfactory cells that detect odors are neurons. These are the only neurons that are exposed to the outside environment, and so this is stressful for them, and they only live about 60 days. Now remember, neurons usually, once they die, are not replaced. But luckily for us, in our sense of smell, the olfactory cells are replaced about every 60 days. There are basal cells, which act as stem cells, that replace our olfactory cells whenever they die. So, should you damage your olfactory mucosa and your olfactory cells die, as long as you still have basal cells present, they can divide, and after about 60 days you will have fully replaced all of your olfactory cells, and your sense of smell would still be intact. But if you were to kill your olfactory cells and your basal cells, then you would totally lose your sense of smell. Now, smell has huge effects on our social interaction and our behavior. For example, women, when they hang out together and spend a lot of time, their menstrual cycles will sync up. Men will have a drop in testosterone when they're around menstruating females, and a spike of testosterone when they're around an ovulating woman. They did some stripper studies, and they found that strippers, one night every 28 days, make more money, 150% more tips one night each month, and that coincides to the night that they ovulate. So a lot of our behavior and social interaction is affected by smell. Each of our olfactory cells has only one receptor type and binds only one odorant. Odorants are odor molecules. In order for the odor molecules to be detected, they must be dissolved in mucus. Remember, with taste, in order to detect flavors, the flavor molecules have to be dissolved in a solution. And for flavor, that is saliva. For smell, the solution is mucus. We have mucus, which is snot in our nose, to dissolve the odor molecules in so that they can be detected. So odor molecules will enter your nose, they will dissolve into the mucus, and they will bind to the receptors found on the olfactory hairs. And when they bind to the receptor, they will induce a receptor potential, and if it is great enough, it will reach threshold at the axon hillock and stimulate an action potential along the axon of our olfactory cell. The axon will synapse with the mitral and tufted cells, which will continue back to the rest of the brain along the olfactory tract. Now, the projection pathway for the olfactory cells is quite complicated, so we're just going to make it more simplistic. The olfactory cells, in order to be exposed to the outside environment, they have to leave the cranial cavity, and so there are holes in the cribriform plate of the ethmoid bone through which the dendrite and the olfactory hairs pass so that they can be exposed to the outside environment. So the signal will have to travel up this neuron, which is going to go through the cribriform plate of the olfactory of the ethmoid bone and form the olfactory nerve. They will travel to synapse with the tufted and mitral cells, which travel back to the brain along the olfactory tract. Now, they will head towards the primary olfactory cortex and the temporal lobe, but that's not their only destination. For example, certain smells will make us cough because some signals will be sent to the hypothalamus and to the amygdala. Smell greatly affects memory. My grandma, for example, always drank Folgers coffee, instant coffee, and every time I smell that coffee, then it instantly makes me think of her. And this is because smell doesn't have to first pass through the hypothalamus. The thalamus. It doesn't have to first pass through the thalamus like all the other sensory cells, sensory neurons do. And because it doesn't, it can induce us to think of certain memories before our thalamus can tell us that it shouldn't come to our conscious attention. So for the projection pathway of the olfactory nerve, you need to remember that the olfactory cells themselves form cranial nerve 1, that they travel back to the brain along the optic tract, and the primary olfactory cortex is in the temporal lobe, and that olfactory action potentials do not have to first pass through the thalamus. They can pass to many parts of the brain without first going through the thalamus.